what you're looking at is a 1997 AM General Hummer, also known as the Hummer H1, and it is the most ridiculous road-going passenger SUV truck thing maybe ever. In this video, we're going to give you a full tour, talk about the gadgets and gizmos, and talk about why it's both insanely awesome and insanely ridiculous.
So the Hummer was actually a civilian version of the Humvee, which started production in 1983, and that stood for
HMMWV, High Mobility Multi-Purpose Wheeled Vehicle.
Yeah, what he said. Well, anyways, they built this in civilian form starting in '92 all the way through 2006.
Now, GM bought the marketing rights to the Hummer in 1999, but it's worth noting every civilian Hummer sold from 92 all the way up through 06 were actually manufactured by a company called AM General, the same company who built the military spec of this truck. Now, to convert it to road spec, they honestly didn't do a whole lot. It's pretty rough and ready, and we'll talk about that now. You do get quite a bit of engine noise.
What's that, Tommy? I can't hear you from all the way over there.
I feel like we need to be passing notes like it's third grade again, just to communicate what we're doing. Let's get some AC going here too. Now, the nice thing about this thing is there is actually a real AC, which I don't think the military models had, at least not initially. And as ridiculous as this thing is, this is an absolute pleasure to drive. First of all, it's got like 1990s over-boosted American power steering. So you've got thousands of pounds of Hummer on 37s, and look, one finger will do it. And it's got the worst visibility I've ever seen in any vehicle. I can't see that corner, which is a problem because it's about 12 feet away, and you got this giant pillar in the middle between them. But, having said that, it's an amazing driving experience. The sound, the squeaks, the rattles, the sense of power. I can see why Schwarzenegger was such a big proponent of bringing the Hummer to civilian use.
Do you feel your chest hair is growing by every little press of that accelerator?
Yeah, single hair. I have one chest hair, and it's really growing proud. Let's give it a little squirt of acceleration. Well, we're rolling some coal, but I wouldn't exactly describe it as quick, would you?
No, I mean, 195 horsepower with this heavy of a vehicle, you're not going anywhere fast, that's for sure.
But even still, it's a very surprisingly easy thing to drive. The ride is pretty good, the steering is surprisingly direct. Like, in a lot of ways, this drives better than some lifted Wranglers I've driven. For a vehicle in 37s, it's pretty acceptable, especially one from the 90s.
Now, if you want to pop the hood on this, it's a little bit of a process. But to start that process, you first want to pull on this hood lever that's right inside the door here. That says hood lock, and that'll start it.
So next up, we have to fold the grill guard out of the way, which is not as easy as it seems. You actually have two pins down here, and you pull the pins, and then it will fold forward.
So then after you get that grill pulled forward, you need to pull these latches out. There's one on each side. And you do that by simply just pulling it towards you.
So with the hood latches undone, we can now open up the hood of the Humvee, and it's simply a matter of kind of lifting up both sides at the same time because it is a really big component. And then on that side, there's this rod that pops into place, and now you have access to the underbelly, or I should say the top belly of the Hummer. There are a ton of different engine lineups in the civilian Hummers, ranging from essentially a small block Chevy V8 all the way up to the Duramax. Now this engine is pre-Duramax. It's a 6.5 liter turbocharged V8 diesel. It's called, typically the Detroit diesel. Now GM also uses this engine, or variations of this engine, in some of their pickup trucks. Horsepower rating 195. The torque rating though pretty high, 430 foot-pounds, and this was made into a 4L80 General Motors transmission.
So what I think is really interesting is it has this really big grille going from the front of the car all the way to the top, like middle of the top of the hood here, and that's actually functional. It goes right into these, it looks like 2 layers of radiators right here. And then also this has a factory-built snorkel right on top. And another interesting thing too is if you look up here, it says no step. You don't want to step on this intake tube. Another interesting fact is that this comes with a working winch right on the front of the vehicle. Now, I don't know if it's a factory winch or not. Maybe you guys can let us know down in the comments below. But I want to give a big shout out to Booth Motors. This vehicle is for sale right now, and if you want to get it check them out or give them a call.
Now, I've always found the driveline on these Hummers to be super, super interesting. So you got the turbo diesel mated to the 4L80 transmission, but they're pretty centrally located in the chassis, which gives you this enormous transmission and driveline tunnel. But the axles and the differentials and the whole suspension setup is what is really interesting to me. So these Hummers actually had four-wheel independent suspension coil sprung, but these had portal axles. So if you can see, the actual half shaft enters the hub at the top, and then is it's got basically a set of gears which lowers the center of the hub to give you even more ground clearance relative to the control arms, which is really, really smart. And then these had locking differentials, but they were automatic lockers front and rear, and you'd engage them by applying some brake and then some throttle, and you can get them to lock up. Now, I've never really driven one of these off-road in anger, but I have talked to a lot of great folks who have served in the military, spent a lot of time behind the wheels of the military version, and they said there's a lot of tricks you learn on how to drive Hummers off-road effectively, but tons and tons of ground clearance thanks to the portal axles. They're really beefy, they're really tough, but they do take some getting used to.
So most Hummers that were civilian form came in either a wagon or a four-door truck. But there were a few rare variants that you could get, including this slant back, which is actually the closest to what the military actually had as far as what you can get in civilian form.
Yeah, and let's check out how it works, Brendan. So first of all, if you've got this little latch, undo the latch, and then the whole rear end kind of pops open just like that, and this one is full of subs. So then the tailgate actually folds down. You got these little hooks. It's very, very, very primitive. And then undo that side, Brendan.
This one, there we go.
There you go. And then it should just simply fold down like that, and then I think you have to rehook the hooks to prevent it from going all the way down. But that is how you get into the back of a slant back Hummer. And for the size of the vehicle, surprisingly limited amount of room. Well, this one especially because it's got all the speakers. Now, stepping into the Hummer, and you realize just what a compromised place this is for civilian use. So we talked about this enormous tunnel, and you can't get a sense of just how wide this is in video. And what this means is that you have very little room from both a driver and a passenger standpoint. It's actually a really cramped place. If you were like wider than I am, or kind of like a skinny, nerdy gerbil guy, like you'd really struggle for especially left shoulder space. And then we get to the gauges, which are quite literally just scattered across the dash, and boy are there some weird gauges. So centrally mounted is the speedometer, and it's quite small. It's actually smaller than my pointer finger. It goes to 100 miles an hour, and then in the middle you've got a smaller dial reading kilometers an hour. Now over here we have water temperature. That's pretty standard. Over here we have our fuel gauge, and then for some reason all the way to the very far right of the dashboard is the RPM, and it says diesel in it, if that wasn't already apparent. Now below that is your clock, good to have, and then to the left we've got oil pressure and then voltage. But my favorite dial is down here. It's this little dial that says tire pressure, and this is for the CTIS system, or Central Tire Inflation System, and this is one of the most iconic features of these older Hummers, is that you can inflate and deflate the tires on the go. So very complicated system, and you'll see these weird hub mounted hoses which actually feed tire pressure to the tires. They're known for leaking, but this one still works. So basically the way it works is that you've got these buttons here. You can inflate and deflate using that switch right there, and then you can select either the front tires, the rear tires, or both, just like that. And then in the middle we have two little basically needles which will tell you what the current tire pressure is and what you're aiming for. So the kind of haphazard button situation continues all the way over here. So we've got a really random group of buttons. So over here we've got our light controls. This is a cool thing. You can actually dim the panel brightness using the slider. We've got dome lights there, and then wiper controls over here with the speed. And then this stock, which looks pretty much like the stock out of an old Jeep I had actually, is your cruise control, and then you push in for the horn.
That's weird.
That's pretty weird. The transmission controls and the transfer case controls are very simple. We've got these big sticks with this giant lockout button, but we've got park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then of course your D has a little O for overdrive. You also have non-overdrive modes 2 and 1, and then this is just your transfer case selector, high, low, and neutral, that kind of thing. And then up here is the parking brake, big giant thing. And then of course you're like, where should we put the window switches? Let's put them on top of the transmission. Why not? So your window switches are over here, along with randomly your defrost button. And then above that we've got this panel which controls the climate control If you were to buy a clapped out $2,000 Silverado, you would have the same climate control from like a GMT 400. We got a little fan speed over here, and then we got just an aftermarket radio deck in there. And I love these. These are pretty cool. These little map lights. I think they look fantastic. Your cup holders are barely reachable, even if you're 6 feet tall like I am. And then I think in here you got just a little bit of storage, so that's where your storage stuff would go to. Like for example, this one has the winch controller in there, which is quite nice. Now, you're lacking legroom, you're lacking shoulder room, you are not lacking headroom though. Lots and lots and lots and lots of headroom back here, or up here.
Now the interior crampage doesn't stop with the back, and I'll demonstrate that here just to show you. Now I'm a little shorter than Tommy, a little wider too, but I do not have a ton of room, especially once this door closes. I'm going to be kind of pinched in and pushed all the way over into this actually middle seat. They have a middle seat here, and I'm going to try and fit in it. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, how ridiculous is this? Like, I'm tucked in here. I have no rooms for my legs. I would have to like splay out and have the front people hold on to my legs if I wanted to sit in this.
Now, what do you think? Is that middle seat standard? I wonder if that was an aftermarket thing or someone. I mean, it looks like it's got the same kind of release as like what we saw in the grill, so I'm wondering if it was factory fitted. Someone will let us know in the comments. And then you also have this big beefy roll bar kind of right above your head too. I love this, so that's cool. You see the headliner says Hummer in it?
Yeah, it's written in Hummer.
This passenger seat's horrible.
Does it feel like a penalty
Dude,
box?
there's like 9 inches of leg room and 2 inches of hip room. That's insane.
Man, this is an interesting experience for sure. I just noticed that it's got the temperature and the compass there.
Yeah, and it's got a rearview mirror, but almost no rear window.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a small little hole back there.
Oh, it feels just as cool from the passenger seat though.
Yes, I get it. Okay, Schwarzenegger, you were right. This is cool.
Now, I think if you're going to get one of these, buying one without the turbo or buying one of the NA like 350 V8s would be pretty miserable. So I definitely recommend finding like a 6.5 with the turbo or even a later Duramax. But those go for big money. Now, I think this thing is listed at about 55 grand, which honestly for a Hummer is not crazy.
No, I was looking, and these 97 and newer models are the more desirable because I guess they get a little bit more power in the engine, a little more torque, and they had a lot more sound deadening, so it wasn't as rattly and clunky as like the military vehicles were.
Alright, you're bringing it out of the main road. Oh, jeez.
Let's see what this thing can do. Alright, that's everything she's got right there. Driving a small apartment.
Yeah, it's kind of like a wave of torque, and you can't rush that wave, and it's not going to go any faster than the wave is going to move, but if you kind of let it ride itself out, let the turbo spool up, you'll get where you need to go. This is way too wide though for like, I'm over here clutching my butt as a passenger just seeing the proportions of this thing.
Now, you think a Bronco Raptor is cool, but this has 37-inch tires, which also has the central tire inflation system built in for less than the price of a Bronco Raptor. And the other thing I think that's interesting down here too is the exhaust. So they had to route it out back somehow, but the only way they could was literally by going into the wheel well. And you can see they've got the muffler right here in the wheel well, and then the exhaust comes and just kind of points down towards the ground. I guess that's so if you're going through any deep water, you don't get water that goes up into the exhaust.
So from what I've read, apparently these slant back roofs do come off, and you can kind of see a split there where maybe it comes apart. However, as far as I can tell as well, it would take about 1,000 bolts to get this roof off, so maybe your Bronco is a little easier to get the roof off of. So this thing has dual fuel tanks. You got one filler over here, and then you got another one right here, and it's got the beefiest D-rings I've ever seen in my entire life. So on this ginormous rear bumper, you can see him just dangling back here, but my favorite are actually the ones on a hood, so that if, for example, you get stuck in your mall parking lot and you need to be lifted out by a helicopter, you can do it from the hooks on the hood. Now, of course, a military Hummer was a light vehicle. It was never intended to be up-armored in the way that they ended up being, and that kind of gave these things a bad reputation because like the warfare changed and you had a vehicle that was never intended to do what it was ended up doing with huge amounts of armor on it. One cool thing about Hummers too is they actually have 7 slots in the grille, and if I recall right, the Jeep Corporation, which I think at the time was AMC, sued over this, and they lost. So apparently Hummers can have 7 slots as well. But overall, Brendan, what do you think of the H1? You like it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's a novelty item, right? It's not something that you'd want to have as a daily driver. It's the off-road version of having a very high-end supercar. It's something to drive around, to take to car shows, to feel cool in, to look cool in. But as far as a daily, I don't know that I would do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Huge thank you to Booth Motors, by the way, for making this thing happen. This thing is awesome. It's for sale right now. Check out Booth Motors LLC if you want to be the very proud owner of this exact H1. Those guys are awesome. We'll see you in the next video.